Hey everybody and welcome to Board Game Heaven. My name is Raymond and in this video I'm taking a look at Crossing Fates by Elroy Chung, published by NetD Limited. And this is on Kickstarter. If you click the link in the description below or the I in the corner of this video, you can check that out. And it is a competitive card game for 2 to 4 players, which plays in roughly 45 to 90 minutes. And in this game you're playing cards on the table and you're trying to match images and certain abilities that you can unlock by combining cards together. Has some very interesting mechanisms and some lovely artwork. So in this video I will tell you how to set up the game, I'll teach you the rules, and then I'll give you my final thoughts. To set up a game of Crossing Fates, take all of your fate cards, give that deck a shuffle, and deal every player 7 cards. Take the city card deck and the planning card deck and give those decks a shuffle and deal each player 2 of those cards. And then every player takes a look at those 2 cards and decides which one of those 2 cards they want to keep. Return the cards you did not pick to the table and give each player one of these overview cards with the totem abilities. These cards are double-sided, and on the back you will find an overview of the phases of the game. Leave some room next to the deck to play 5 cards in a row. Keep all of your tokens nearby. These are your victory point tokens, which are double-sided, your shield tokens, which are also double-sided, and your fate point tokens, as well as these city tokens, and then you're ready to play. In Crossing Fates, when a player has 12 or more victory points at the end of a round, the game ends. And the player who has the most victory points wins the game. Players can gain the victory points by winning the Battle of the Fates in every round. The game has 3 types of cards. You've got the Fate cards, which are the cards you draw and play. There's the City cards, which give you a special ability, and you can earn your City and Fate point tokens. And there's Planning cards, which let you swap city tokens for certain bonuses. The game is played in rounds until one player reaches or exceeds 12 victory points, and every round has 5 turns. And a round is played in several phases. Now the first phase is playing cards. So the player with the city card with the lowest value, they have a number in the bottom left on the card, and this is value 8. The player with the lowest value starts the game, and that player takes the top card from the stack and plays it in the public area on the table. And then they play a card from their hand to their player area on the table. And then the player with the next lowest city value plays a card, etc. until all players have played 1 card. But only the starting player places a card from the stack in the public area, and this is to indicate the round number. So once every player has played a card to the table and we're back to the starting player, and that player takes another card, puts the second card in the public area and plays a card from their hand, etc. Now whenever you play a card to the table, let's say this was the first card I played from my hand in a previous round, in the first round, and now it's the second round, the first player has already played a card and we're back to me, then you get to play a card either next to an existing card on either side, and the images do not need to match, and in this case they happen to match on both sides, but I can just as well play any other card. But I can also take a card and overlap half of a card, or even cover the entire card if I wanted to at a later point in the game. But the stack limit of cards is 2, and covered cards cannot be targeted by effects, nor do they count towards scoring at the end of a round, which I will explain in a bit. Should a player for some reason run out of cards and the round is not over yet, then instead of playing a card, they get 1 fate point token as compensation. Now, every time you play a card, the player checks to see if they trigger any totem effects. And this happens when the icons on the sides of the cards connect and form a circle with two icons. Now, not all of the cards have icons on both sides. Some have none, some have two. And I will explain what those icons mean and what they do. There's a reference card here later on in this video. So then, after cards have been played to the table and possible totem combinations have been triggered. In this case, there's no two icons, so nothing triggers. Had I played this here, then something would have triggered. Players have the opportunity to trigger one of these effects on a planning card by spending the tokens depicted on these cards. And these cards have all kinds of different effects and all kinds of different costs, and they always cost one or sometimes two optional country colors, country tokens. This says or, so I can either spend two of these gray tokens or two of these light blue tokens to trigger this effect, which simply says gain 2 fate point tokens. And for 4 of these red country tokens, I gain 1 fate point token in the reset of the game. The text is still being spell checked. This is a Hong Kong designer, but you will basically get a fate point at the start of a new round. And again, I will explain how you get those country tokens in a bit. Then, after all players have had 5 turns, it's time for the second phase of a round, which is the Battle of the Fates. And this is when all players compare their total fate point tokens to see who wins the round. And to determine your number of fate points, you need to take 3 steps. The first step is simply count the number of fate point tokens you have gathered during the round. Second, you determine how many fate points you earn from your city card. So simply count how many matching factions are on the cards in front of you. And if you have 2 matching halves connected, that's worth 2 points. And a card with just 1 faction on it is basically worth 2 points. So this is the dark faction here, which would be 3 points. And this white faction here is 2 points. So let's say, for example, I have also played 5 cards during the game, and maybe I've played this card here, and maybe later I also played this card, and I overlapped this just to get some extra points. And these 2 are still in my hand. So I've played 5 cards, then I check my city card here, and as you can see, these have several different icons on them with values and colors. So these represents all the different types of factions, and if I match a number of points equal to the numbers here, I get rewards for that. So let's say, for example, here the light blue faction says for 2 points I get this round symbol here, and the round symbol is a city token, and the star symbol is a fate point. Now, the stars are technically in the game victory points, so this star is going to be a diamond shape, just like this in the final version. So in this example, the light blue one needs 2 points, and that's what I have. Let's see. Yes, over here. This is the light blue faction, which is 2 points. So that means I would get this reward. Had I had a bigger matching panorama, if you will, with more of these, so for example, maybe I had this card here and I had another one, I don't at the moment, but if I had 4 of those in a row, then I would get this reward. You wouldn't get both, you only would get the highest. But in this case, I have this. So that earns me the light blue city token. So I take 1 of those, that matches this, and I add that to my personal pool. Here it says the green one with 4. I don't have any green on the table. And again, this was green, but it's covered up, so it doesn't count, and it would have been enough anyway. I need 2 for the black faction. I've got 3, so that's more than enough, and I get a black faction token. So I get this one, another city token. The dark blue one, which is the water faction, I don't have any cards of that at the moment, so I don't get any rewards there. The yellow ones also need 3. I only have the 1 here, so I don't get anything from that either. And then there's the gray one, which is 2, and that's this faction. It's basically white, but the icons are in gray, and I get 1 of those as well. So I earned 3 of these tokens, but had I done better, I might have also gotten some fate point tokens. So that way you can also earn more fate points. So it's pretty important to take into account what you can earn with your city card. And as you can see, there are 7 different factions in the game. So your cards will have several different ones, but never all 7. There's usually 6 different city colors on your city card. And I'll show you some other examples of the other city cards. So for example, here we have a city card that has 3 factions where you can earn extra points if you have longer matching sets on the table. And here is another one with, again, different. So each card has different bonuses for different combinations of cities, and some of them will get you lots of fate points, but they will have a lower number, meaning that this one will start sooner. So they all have a different number. So some of these cards might be slightly weaker than others, and also, additionally, each of these city cards have different special effects that may trigger at different times during the game. So that is also very important to be aware of. So those are the city cards. So in my example, I did not get any fate points from matching groups here. And a third way to earn fate points is by simply matching groups once again. But for each matching group, you get the number of fate points of the points that this group is worth minus 1. So in this case, this is just 1 person in this yellow group, so that's 0 fate points. This is 2, so I get 1 fate point for that. This is 3, so I get 2 for that. And this is 2, so I get 1 for that. So in total, I have 4 fate points. So I take 4 tokens, 1, 2, 3, 4, which means that at the end of this round, I would have gotten 5 fate points. And then you compare all the fate points that all the players have gathered, and the player with the most fate points gets 3 victory points, second place gets 2 victory points, and the third and fourth place only get 1 victory point. And in case of a tie, the player with the highest city card value wins and becomes the person with the most victory points. And in a 3-player game, there is no second place reward, so you basically just have the 3 victory points, 1 and 1. And in a 2-player game, that's the same. There's also no third place, so the winner gets 3 and the loser gets 1 victory point. So let's say in this example, I was third in a 4-player game, so I get 1 victory point, and these are double-sided. So one side will have one of these points of the star colored in, indicating that it's 1 point, which is not the case in this prototype. And the other side will have the full star colored in, indicating that this is 5 points. So this is just 1 point. And then you just keep on playing every time you play the game the same way until somebody reaches or exceeds 12 victory points. So then it's time for phase 3 of the game. If no one has reached 12 victory points, a new round will begin. But first, in this third phase, all players get to pick 1 card from the public area and take that into their hands. And the player in last place picks first, then the third, then the second, and lastly the winning player. And any remaining cards are discarded. So like I said, the starting player, the one with the lowest value, flips over 1 card at the beginning of each round. So after 5 rounds, there will be 5 cards in the public area, and then people will have played 5 rounds and 5 cards to their table. So then in phase 3, the losing player, so maybe the 4th place player or somebody else, and they pick, let's say they pick this card, and they just take that into their hands. So then it's my turn, and I was third. I only had 1 victory point. So let's say I could check my city card and see what is beneficial to me. So maybe let's say I want something that gets me some victory point or some fate points as well. So that's either green, dark blue, or yellow. So I'm going to go with dark blue here. That's this faction. So I'm going to take this card into my hand. Then the second place winner takes this card, and the third place winner takes this card. So this card is left, and that is simply discarded. Now, if you gained a shield token during the game, which I will explain in a bit, then at the end of a round, that shield token, if it's not used and still in your possession, you flip it over to its light side, because shield tokens only last 2 rounds, so it's kind of like a use it or lose it situation, which lasts 2 rounds. So you flip those over, and any flipped over shield tokens that you already had are returned to the public pool. And also at this point, players have the opportunity to swap one of their country tokens for a country token of a different color. So if I take a look at my card here, what I need is the gray ones, light blue ones, and possibly the red ones. So I already have a gray and a blue one. I can't use the black one, so I'm going to swap this one for a light blue one. Next, any fate point tokens are returned to the public pool. Any played cards are all discarded, like so. And a new round starts. And again, the starting player first deals 4 cards from the stack to all players. So let's do that first. I take 1, 2, 3, 4 cards. So if I had played all of my cards, or maybe I have lost some cards during the game, you always end up with a hand of minimum 5 cards, 1 from the public area and 4 from the stack. So you always have enough cards to play all 5 rounds unless you lose more cards. There is also a hand size maximum. So the hand limit is 8 cards. So if at this point I've got more than 8 cards at the start of a new round, I need to discard back down to 8. And so once all players have refilled their hand, the first player will once again flip over 1 card to the public area, play 1 card from their hand in their own area, and then each player takes their turns, and then the second turn again, and that is simply repeated throughout the game. So now it's time to explain what exactly those totem abilities do, because as you can see, you can combine cards and combine these tokens, which are explained on this reference card. But before I do that, I need to explain a few final things. If a player makes a totem combination that cannot be activated because there is nothing to target, or maybe it has a negative effect and they can only target themselves, then they can get 1 fate point instead of activating that combination as a compensation. So if the only valid target is yourself, you may choose not to resolve the effect and take that 1 fate point. But if you can target an opponent, then you must. And finally, again, there's the shield token. Now, a player may use a shield token to cancel any totem effect, either targeted at themselves or another player, which means players can also help other players. Now, after using a shield token, it is always returned to the common pool. And again, if you haven't used a shield token during the turn, then it is flipped over and it will stay on your side for another turn. And if you haven't used it, then it is also returned to the common pool. So when combining cards, you may get a combination of different types of icons. There are 4 action icons, which are depicted here and are always on the right side of the cards. And there are 4 target icons, which are depicted here and are always on the left side of the cards. And this basically means that there are 16 different combinations you can make with cards that trigger different abilities. So let's go through those one by one. So the plus symbol on the right side of this card here simply means you gain something. So when combined with this card, which has a 2 on it, that means you gain 2 fate point tokens from the common pool. So in that case, you simply take 2 of those tokens and add them to your stash. When combined with the shield icon, again, you simply take 1 shield token from the public stash and add it to your table. When combined with the hand icon with a card, that means you gain 1 card from the deck and take that into your hand. And when combined with this icon of a card being placed on the table, you again gain one card from the stack, but instead of adding it to your hand, you immediately place it on the table. And this could mean you could trigger another totem effect. You could also place the newly gained card on top or partly covering another card. And if you play it on top of another card, so let's say this was the current situation. Now I can only have a stack of 2, so maybe this was the current situation, and I gained a card from the deck, then I could play that here and I would trigger 2 new effects, which I then resolve in the order of my choosing. So that is the gain card explained. So let's move on to the flip card. With the flip card combined again with the fate point tokens like this, you can flip over any 2 fate point tokens. So this means I can take a fate point token from the opponent, flip that over to its negative side. The final version will have a different backside because fate point tokens are positive on one side, but a negative fate point on the other side. So if an opponent has several fate points, I could then target 2 fate points from one opponent or 1 fate point from 2 opponents and flip those over to the negative side. Or otherwise, if an opponent had done that to me in a previous turn, I can flip mine back to their positive side. Or I can even make a combination. If I only have 1 negative fate point, I could flip that over to the positive side and flip another fate point from an opponent to the negative side. You can also flip over a shield token, which means you target a shield token and you can flip it over to its its faded side, so it will only last 1 more round. Or the other way around, if I had one and I wanted to use it longer or want to make sure I have it during the next round, I can flip it back to this side again. Now, an effect that targets a shield can never be cancelled by the shield token that it targets. So you can use these shield tokens to cancel any kind of totem effect except when the shield token itself is targeted. If, however, I have multiple shield tokens, then I could use one to cancel the action targeted at the other. You can also combine the flipping action with a card in a player's hand. So that means that I simply flip over a card in a player's hand. So if this was a player's hand here, I'd simply flip over a card, which means other players can partially see what's in that other player's hand, can see that card, and that player would not be able to play that card as normal. They can still play the card to their area on the table, but they would need to play it face down. So they'd have to remember what that card was and then play it somewhere, and then hopefully be able to flip it back over with this same action later during that round. Or they could just hold on to it in their hand and maybe discard it at a later time. And finally, you can also flip a card that's on the table. And this can be any card anywhere on the table. So that means if I had played a card face down because it was flipped over in my hand, I could, with this action, flip it back over, but I can also target a card in an opponent's area and flip that card to the backside. But I can also target a card in the public area and flip that over if I really wanted to prevent a player from taking a certain card, although you're usually better off trying to flip over a card in a player's personal area. So the next action you can take is removing a card. Combining this icon with the fate point tokens, that means you can just remove any 2 fate points that are in the game. So that means simply to return them to the public pool. You can also remove a shield token back to the public pool. And again, a shield token that is targeted cannot be sacrificed to prevent that from happening unless you have another shield token. You can remove a card from any player's hand. And in that case, you pick a player and then randomly draw a card from their hand and just put it in the discard pile. or you can remove a card in play on the table. And this again can be a card in any player's personal area or in the public area. But remember, you can never target a card that is partially or fully covered by another card. And lastly, there's the steal icon. And as you may have guessed, when you use the steal action and you target fate points, you can steal any 2 fate point tokens from any player and add them to your own collection. You can steal a shield token from another player, and once again, a targeted shield point cannot be sacrificed to prevent that action from happening. You can steal a card from any player's hand, and you again randomly pick a card from that player's hand and add it to your own hand. And in this case, when you steal a card from the table, this is a little different. You can only take a card from the public area, and just like gaining a card from the deck, in this case you take a card from the public area and immediately play it on your player area. And once again, that can chain several effects. So I could use this to, for example, take this card. I place that immediately in my area next to this card, which means I gain a card from the table, which means I draw a card, which I then again immediately play. And I could play it here, chain another effect, so I could destroy someone's shield and so forth. And those are all the rules that you need to know how to play Crossing Fates. The designer is also working on a 2 versus 2 team variant, which might be interesting, so check that out on the Kickstarter page. But for now, let's go to my final thoughts. So my final thoughts on Crossing Fates by Elroy Chung. Let's start with the components. Now, obviously, everything you see here is still a prototype, so the final product will be different and will be better in quality. But so far, what I've seen is that the cards are of a quite nice thickness. Actually, I think this is close to what it will be in the end. The printing will be better, I was told, so higher quality of print. It does already look pretty nice though. And the tokens will be of a better quality as well, although these are nice and chunky tokens already. And so the quality overall is already looking good. You'll get a box just like this with the magnetic lid, and you'll have nice print on it as well with the character art, etc. So it will look really nice, and hopefully it will also have a nice insert to keep all the tokens and the cards in place. So I can't really comment too much on the final component quality, but seeing this, I think that will not be a problem and will look really good. The artwork is fantastic. I love the artwork on all of these cards. It's just so good looking, so colorful, and so nice and bright, and all the different characters and these different cities and nations that are depicted. You have like the ice characters and water world characters, and there's like this chimney filled industrial city, and there's a forest, and you name it, and that looks really cool. I absolutely love the artwork on this. Big thumbs up for that. The theme is kind of irrelevant to the game, really. There isn't really a story behind all of this. It's basically about competing nations, basically. They're all different factions and different nations which have different cities, and they try to be the best, I guess. You're battling for fate points, but you're using all of these cards with all of these nations. So there really isn't much of a theme as far as I can tell from this prototype. So, and I don't think it adds that much to the gameplay either, because what you're doing is, you know, matching cards and trying to combine those totems to get those actions that you want to trigger, and, you know, steal cards or take new cards or flip cards over and get some tokens, get those shield tokens and what have you. So that's what you're concentrating on. But the theme, I mean, could have technically been anything, but it does lend for some really nice artwork. So I'm gonna be neutral on the theme here. The gameplay though is where it's at in this game, because I was blown away the first time I played this with the designer. We played it online on Tabletop Simulator, and I was impressed with the amount of choices you have. You've got a handful of cards. You start out with 7 cards. and you're trying to match not just the images to get, you know, bigger clans together so you score points with that, but you're also trying to match those symbols into a circle on the totems to get those abilities. And the trick is to try and figure out in which order you want to play the cards and in which order you want to trigger those abilities. Because you likely want to get those shield tokens early on so you can get yourself protected from attacks from the other players. And you want to probably get your fate points as late as possible so they can't be stolen or flipped over into the negative side. And you will also want to wait until your opponent has fate points if you have the ability to steal them. So there's a lot of strategy here, and I really like that. I really like the puzzling. And of course, it's a lot of fun to just match those cards to have a nice picture, but that is obviously not all there is to it. That's what, you know, catches your eye, but then you see all those symbols and all those tokens, excuse me, and you're like, oh, there's a lot more I can do with this. And that really blew me away. And you have these city cards. So at the end of a round, you're checking to see how many points you have from each clan. And if you have enough points to match the numbers on your city cards, you get additional tokens. You get some fate points, and that's what you're going for. And you get some of those city tokens, which you in turn can use in these planning cards. So you have one of the planning cards, and those tokens can be exchanged for all sorts of things to give you an advantage in the game. So there is a lot of depth here, and I really, really enjoyed that. I think this is a fantastic game. And even though the rules are still being developed, there might be some additional bits or some tweaking and some balancing of the cards. But so far, from what I've seen, I had a really, really great time with this. It looks simple and it's practically very easy to explain and to teach. But the first time you play it, you kind of have all these options. And you're like puzzling and maybe even struggling a bit with what you want to do first. But it's not too complex so that it would give you analysis paralysis. You basically just play cards and see what happens the first time. And then afterwards, it starts to click. And that's when the game really starts to shine, and you're like, okay, so now I'm going to try this, and then I'm going to try that. I'm going to keep those stealing cards for later so I can steal some good stuff from my opponents. And it's just fantastic. I absolutely love the gameplay of this card game. 2 big thumbs up. The replayability is good. It's just like any other board game or card game that you bring to the table. You play it, and after one entire game, you might just want to play it again. It's not too long. If you're playing with 2 players, it can actually be over in half an hour if you're accustomed to the rules. With 3 or 4 players, it might take a little bit longer. But I mean, it's basically the same game every time, but of course you're getting different cards, and you're getting different city cards and planning cards. So your strategies are gonna be different every time. And well, that to me is just a lot of fun. So the replayability of this game is fairly good, I think. And finally, the language dependency. While there is some language, mostly on the planning cards, which tell you what kind of action you can do by exchanging those city tokens, there is not a lot of text on the cards. There is some text on these city cards where you have that special ability in the top here. So there is some language dependency. It's not fully language independent, sadly, but there's not a lot of text. I feel that even if you're playing with someone who is not very good in the English language in this case, you could easily explain what their cards do, or just explain all the cards from the start, and then see, you know, just play it and see what happens. Or maybe you can make a crib sheet where you just write down all of these cards. There's not a whole lot of them. This prototype has 8 city cards and 8 planning cards. I don't know if there will be more. Maybe the Kickstarter will have some stretch goals, but I feel it would be very easy to just translate these on a sheet if you need to, because all the rest of the cards, basically the fate cards that you use to play the game and the tokens, are all language independent, and these combinations that you trigger all have icons on them. So that works really well. And that is basically it. So all I can say, I really like this game. The gameplay is where it's at with this game, and that is the most important. The artwork is absolutely stunning. Components, I guess, will be good. I mean, this is already pretty good. The final version will only be better. And yeah, I can only recommend this. Just check out the Kickstarter. Go check it out. Click the eye in the corner of this video or the link below. Check out the Kickstarter. And yeah, perhaps pledge for a copy of this game. I really hope this does well on Kickstarter, that it funds, because I'm really looking forward to playing the final copy of this game. That was it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you hit the bell icon, you'll also get notified whenever I upload a new video. And if you go to my Patreon page, you can also see how you can support my channel, which is greatly appreciated, which you can do for as little as just $1 per month, which will give you access to some Patreon exclusive videos and your name in the credits of all of my videos as well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on Board Game Heaven.